Good afternoon. How are you? Well, Thomas Jefferson's really proud of himself today. 72 degrees here. It's glorious. There's no wind and the sun is out. Even though it's later, but fall back, spring forward. Spring forward gives us this extra light, so that's pretty cool. There are things going on, disturbing. One is what Hur did yesterday, H-U-R. The special counsel appointed by the inert, sleepy, and confused Attorney General Garland to investigate the documents that Biden had in various places that when he discovered he had them, volunteered their existence and sat and was thoroughly debriefed. So, what could Hur do with that? Really nothing, but say he didn't have the intent, the criminal intent. But he did other things. And Garland had been promising that he would make this report public. And he did just that. And what Hur did, sort of like it was an Easter hunt, he hid things in the report, but they were in plain view because he knows that everybody's going to scour all the pages looking for the things that he put there with that purpose in mind. For example, on the one hand, Biden has a photographic memory. On the other hand, and this is the part that gets in the report, not the first thing. On the other hand, what Hur reports is that, Biden would have a defense here because he's a forgetful old man, playing into one of the tropes that are the meat and potatoes of the campaign by Trump to win office when he's the one who apparently has cognitive decline. But there was another one too, which was poignant, and it was that Biden didn't have a focus on when his son died, and that's not true at all, and that's apparently contradicted by the transcript. Now, so all of that came out, right? No, not exactly, because, for example, in the Washington Post, what they have is Hur stands ground on the Hill. So they basically have him holding his own when I think the report should have been Hur shown to be political in his so-called independent investigation. Too long for a headline, of course, but you could shorten it. Hur, opportunist in the campaign. And, in that I would like to have the statement made that he ducked the question whether or not he'd accept the position from Trump. So what we have here is we have a limp kind of coverage of what happened. And we're not getting the news that this guy Hur is in conflict between perhaps his personal ambition or merely his loyalty to Trump and keeping options open. And as a result, we get those who didn't hear any of the hearing or read any of the documents would be led to believe, so Biden is not so clean. And nobody seems interested to talk about the fact that Pence was not investigated at all. But this is the problem with Garland. Garland is like a mole from the Republican side with his Federalist connections, screwing the people who appointed him, but also misleading and being unfair as he goes about it. Now, I know politics is a contact sport, but using the office, instead of remaining silent in the face of things that hurt your oh-so-tender ego and your failure to commit to law enforcement, we have instead an attorney general who celebrates how he can screw the administration he supposedly serves. But I didn't appoint him. And at some point, I think that Biden must have winked at him and said, oh, we'll take care of this Trump thing in good time on our own. I don't know, meeting at the ballot box. The error of the Washington Post coverage, and I only singled them out because I follow them more closely, but I'm not sure anybody covered it in terms of like a news hound. It's sort of like on the one hand and the other hand. In other words, her stood his ground means they didn't lay a glove on me when they did. And the fact of the laying of the glove on him in a Republican hearing by articulate Democratic inquisitors is lost in the coverage. And if I didn't have it on in the background, I wouldn't know some of these things. Although I am somewhat of an obsessive in following these things. In Georgia, we have developments too. McAfee, who apparently is up for re-election in November, came into court or just filed a decision striking several counts in the indictment. And the ones that he struck had to do with solicitation of public officials for the failure to serve their oath. Now, some say, oh, there could be hundreds of ways they could do that. But, from the context of the complaint, or indictment rather, you know what we're talking about. We're talking about the election. We're talking about failing to do things that the oath would require. Now, if this was a federal case, you could submit what's called a bill of particulars and supplement the indictment and say, here, that's what we're doing. I don't know why the court can't fashion a rule like that. I don't know that McAfee is trying to show that he's fair so that he gets those Republican votes that wonder what he's doing as the judge on this case. But if I were the prosecutor, rather than take the time to try to reopen the grand jury to add this, or to take an appeal, I'd say, fine, those 3 counts are out. RICO still stands. I'm going to beat your brains in with what I've got. And I'd go forward. Well, you watch and see what she does. The next question, of course, is does she get a chance to do it? Does she get a chance to say, hey, I don't care about those 3 counts for Trump. And, there were a couple of them, others who had the same claimed defect. And the defect is you didn't spell it out enough. And so how does the defense get sufficient notice to know what's at issue that they have to respond to? That's the legalese. And that's what McAfee has decided. And now they can seek a rehearing or reconsideration. But the next step is what's going to happen with the motion to disqualify. And I think he's going to survive. She is going to survive that, Willis and Wade. I think they'll survive that because the defense didn't prove their case. And you have to do that. It's not enough to wave your arms and say, this is embarrassing. I can't believe these 2 people had sex. Well, tell me, gentlemen in germs, how in the world that has anything to do with your case? And what conflict is there in your case? And just assume the worst case scenario from your perspective, that he did spend a lot of money on her. You're saying that was a kickback and they knew about it? Come on. It's ridiculous. And you could well imagine that they became friends, legitimate close friends, as political types who talked about her campaign at some length and formed a relationship. And debating about when they got in the sack or not just seems to me to be puerile, which is a compliment to Trump and his team, because they're less than that in terms of maturity, in terms of decorum, in terms of truth-telling, in terms of just being say, a second-year law student getting this right. They don't do that. Now, it's interesting that the governor, at the same time, is putting back into service a commission which is to disapprove of and remove prosecutors. Now, there were people who opposed the earlier iteration of this proposal, but when they withdrew from going forward with it, in part because the court said, where are the rules for this thing? Now they're back again, and I assume those people will object again, and I don't think it will succeed if in the political sense there was the hope that by this device they would kick her off the case if the judge didn't. I don't think the judge will kick her off the case because he's a coward. Even if he had the goods, I'm saying he would do that. But as a lawyer, I don't think, there's no there. And so that's what should happen. Will it happen? Well, we've seen the contortion and distortions and disregard for law, common sense, facts in the past, and in all matters trump. So we have to always be on guard. But I think when the dust settles on this skirmish, it's going to mean, okay, let's play ball. Let's have the trial. If I were McAfee, that's what I would do. And I would take some cover in being balanced by finding these several counts to dismiss. It happens in cases. It's why people who are prosecutors charge 30 counts. Yeah, you got 5. You beat them at the end of the trial. But the other 25 is going to send you to jail for the rest of your natural life if the judge decides to do that. A final significant issue that I think is distressing and tells us a lot about our government and free trade. Now, Adam Smith, I guess, wrote Wealth of Nations in 1776. I'm pretty sure it was that year, which is the same year that the Enlightenment struck Thomas Jefferson and others to create the Declaration of Independence from Great Britain, abusive in its colonialism toward the new Americas. So this notion of free trade was not as simple as the cartoon statements that we get from Republicans and others, but there's a whole body of information that deals with this. And what is the TikTok vote all about? First, let me give you the headline. My suspicion is because we don't have a back door into TikTok, as I believe we do to every other social network. That is to say, even though Twitter become X or Facebook be what it is and so forth, that the government has found a way to get in the back door of all of these. And I think what they're upset about is they can't get into the back door of TikTok. Now, TikTok, I think anticipating this argument, has created a New York entity. I said New York, excuse me. It's not a United States entity. And that United States entity is where the data is going to be. So it's not going to be in Red China. It's going to be right here in the US of A. And the fight over whether they can make the demands from Congress have split the parties and split within the parties. And now I've circled the field a little bit. So you might say, so what is this really about? In its simplest terms, it provides that there are, so many days for TikTok to find someone to buy TikTok. And if they don't, they're banned in America. And so, for example, Gerald Connolly, who I think is an outstanding member of Congress, he only voted present. And he represents a large chunk of the high-tech community where he is in Northern Virginia. Now, I was chief of staff and special counsel to Zoe Lofgren. She's in Silicon Valley. She voted no against this bill, and I think that was a righteous vote. So the vote in the end was, I think, 352 to 65 for the bill, and the 65 votes were split between Republicans and Democrats, and those who just voted present. In the Senate, where it goes next, there are people like Ron Paul, who's going to probably put a stop to it. Maybe one of the few times I agree with him. And at one point, Trump was against this bill, and some say he's for it now, and he's for it based on who knocked on his door to give him campaign contributions. I don't know if any of that part is true. I mean, it sure sounds like him, but I don't know that it's true. So here we have America, the capitalistic country, and Biden, who says he's a capitalist, basically picking winners and losers in the invisible hand of the free market. Well, it's a visible hand, and it's the hand of government, and it's the hand of government afraid of information, I think, that they can't control. And this feels like censorship. And the same Washington Post that I was critical of just moments ago wrote an editorial on behalf of the Washington Post that is opposed to this bill. Biden has said if it gets to his desk, he'll vote for it, and I think that's wrong. And I reserve the right to disagree with the head of my party, particularly on things like this. And there is a scan of positions by Biden that fits into, if you will, a kind of pro-business slant, which would be okay, but it's usually to change the rules of the game at a point when they're going to operate as they should. I think of how labor was going to go on strike, and Trump killed that. And, there are other examples. This is a recent one. And the trouble with politicians is they'll break your heart. The best of them will break your heart. Trump could never break my heart because he's an ogre and has no business in politics and no business in the White House and never should have. And he deserves a small 6x6 cell. So that's what I got today. So I hope you're well, and I hope you have weather like I'm enjoying here, and not the tragic aspects of the global warming finding foot in places that cause great harm and disaster. So the trees where I am are a little short, but I'm out here, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.